Hey people, hope everyone's well. This is your state senator, Eric Coleman, coming to you from the Second Senatorial District in the state of Connecticut with another episode of the Senate Reports. I know it's been a while since the last program, and as you can imagine, it's been rather busy. Let me bring you up to date and talk about some of the things that have been going on and some of the things that are coming up that may be of interest to you and other viewers. First, I think at the last program, we may have mentioned that I was in Los Angeles, California, to receive recognition as the Regional Legislator of the Year from the National Black Caucus of State Legislators. That's an organization that I've been a member of for almost as long as I've been in office in the state of Connecticut. So that dates back to the early or mid 1980s. The National Black Caucus of State Legislators is obviously a national organization, including members from the U.S. Virgin Islands. And it is an organization that has a mission of pursuing legislation that is of concern and of interest to the African American communities throughout the country. It is a perfect opportunity as a member of this organization to network and share information with colleagues who are members of various legislative bodies throughout the country. And the camaraderie is another aspect that is very appealing and intriguing as a member of that organization. And so I was quite honored and very proud to have received recognition from that organization as the Legislator of the Year for Region 1, which consists of Region 1, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Vermont. In any event, that's what I did during that was the highlight anyway of my month of December 2015. More recently, I attended a conference in New Orleans. The State Legislative Leaders Foundation sponsored a conference and invited me to be a part of a panel discussion. The focus of the conference was criminal justice reform throughout the states. And as you're probably aware by now, Connecticut is being recognized as at the forefront of the reform movement with respect to the criminal justice system. And I was asked to be a part of a panel to bring the attendees up to date concerning what was happening as far as concerns criminal justice in Connecticut. And I talked a little bit about our Second Chance Society legislation, which was enacted into law in the last session, as well as the work that we did in Connecticut regarding the excessive use of force and police accountability and restoring trust between law enforcement and particularly the African American communities that they serve. Again, that was another, in my estimation, outstanding event. And I was not necessarily surprised, but very pleased to see that the various states that were represented by attendees at the conference were very receptive to many of the things that we were doing in the state of Connecticut. Additionally, I learned that other states are making tremendous strides as far as concerns bail reform and risk assessment and sentencing. And so I think it's very gratifying for those of us who over the course of many years in the legislature have been talking about the correlation between recidivism and the lack of opportunity and denial of opportunity. So it's very gratifying to see that many states are picking up on that and understanding that it is very cost effective, in fact, in order to remove the stigma of conviction and incarceration and to bring about opportunities in the areas of employment and training and housing and other aspects of life that will enable people who are considered to be ex-offenders to support themselves, enable them to support themselves and their families in some meaningful way. So that work will continue in this upcoming session. On the agenda of the Judiciary Committee, which I am the co-chair of, Governor Malloy has put forward what he refers to as Second Chance 2.0. And there are two main aspects of Second Chance 2.0. First, he's talking about bail reform and completely eliminating money bail. For misdemeanors, if a person is arrested under this proposal for a misdemeanor offense, then unless there is some threat that this person poses to another individual or to the community at large, that person would be released virtually on a promise to appear in court. As an alternative, a judge may impose a 10% cash bail alternative, which is significant because it would permit the defendant to post 10% of whatever bail the judge sets. And at the end of that case, if the person has appeared in court every time when he or she was supposed to appear in court, he or she would receive back that 10% cash that he or she posted. And that's significant because, as many of you are aware, the current system involves a non-refundable payment to a bail bondsman. Sometimes those payments to the bail bondsman could be quite excessive, approaching somewhere between 7% and 10%. And that's money, once paid, will never be seen again by the defendant. The second part of the continuation of criminal justice reform in this legislative session has to do with a continuation of raising the age of juvenile jurisdiction. And currently, people are considered juveniles up until the age of 18. The governor is proposing to increase that to 21. And so that up until the age of 21, a person would be treated as a juvenile and would avoid treatment in the adult criminal justice system for the most part. This is, again, trend-setting stuff for the state of Connecticut. And again, it is an initiative that many states around the country are paying particular attention to, and hopefully will be following the lead of the state of Connecticut. We are rapidly approaching the first break for this program, and so we will conclude for the time being right here. We'll take a break and we'll come back and resume the discussion concerning what's going on in the state of Connecticut and what events and activities are upcoming. Hey, welcome back, and thank you for staying with us. We want to continue discussing some of the upcoming events and activities, legislative and community-wise, and just reconnect after a brief hiatus from the Senate reports. On this recent past Saturday, um, I joined with the Council on Regional Education and the Fifth Assembly District Town Committee in sponsoring a forum on pardons. And this is some information that many members of the community were very interested in. We had a good crowd. The forum was held at the Willie Ware Center here in Hartford, Connecticut. And I'd say we had somewhere between 30 and 50 people in attendance who were interested in some of the changes and hopefully refinements that have taken place regarding the criminal justice system and the pardon system in particular. If you recall from previous programs, the Second Chance Society initiative did a few things. It reclassified drug possession offenses to be misdemeanors. It also eliminated mandatory minimum sentencing for drug possession offenses. And then it modified the pardons system and the parole system, streamlining both to make it easier to be pardoned, certainly for certain offenses, nonviolent offenses. But it also sort of expedited the parole system for those people who were convicted and serving sentences and were involved in offenses that were, for the most part, victimless and nonviolent. But with respect to the pardon system, what we did on Saturday was go over some of the changes with people and hopefully give them some better guidance on how to apply for a pardon and how to enhance their chances for being granted a pardon. And in that regard, there were two things that I attempted to highlight, and both of those things had to do with the changes that were brought about by the Second Chance Society initiative. And so one of those things had to do with making certain that people were aware of the procedure and whatever rights they may have regarding applying for a pardon. And significantly, what takes place as a result of the passage of the legislation was that at least two different points, one at the time of sentencing and two at the time of completion of the service of any sentence and completion of probation, the individual is required to be provided with printed material regarding their eligibility for a pardon and printed material indicating how to go about applying for a pardon. The second part of that is that certain individuals have a very high likelihood of being granted a pardon. If, for example, you are a person who was convicted of a misdemeanor offense and subsequently that offense for which you were convicted of is no longer a crime, you would be eligible to apply for a pardon and most likely receive a pardon if your application is made and 5 years prior to that application, you have not been in any difficulty with the law. You've not been arrested, been convicted of any crime, or otherwise had any difficulties with the law. And third, if you were eligible for a diversion program, but no diversion program existed at the time that you were convicted, you should apply for a pardon, and the likelihood is extremely great that you would receive a pardon. Secondly, if your offense was something other than a misdemeanor offense, if, for example, you were convicted of the illegal distribution of drugs, you would nevertheless still be able to apply for a pardon if your application was made and for the 5 years prior to your application, you were not in any trouble with the law. There were no convictions, no arrests, and no other indications of misconduct. And finally, if after your release from incarceration, a period of 10 years has occurred during which you were essentially law-abiding and contributing to your community and not encountering any difficulties with the law, the likelihood is very great that you would be granted a pardon after you apply. So that's what we did on this most recent past Saturday. And I think it was a successful forum. And I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to partner with CREC and the 5th Assembly District Town Committee for the purpose of providing this information to members of the community who feel they may be in a position to take advantage of a pardon application. I want to talk a little bit about a couple of events that are upcoming. One is members of the Hartford community should be aware that the Voices of Women of Color are making preparations for their Trailblazers Award event. There are a number of honorees, including State Representative Matt Ritter, John Motley, and a few others who will be presented with essentially community service awards at the Voice of Women of Color Trailblazers event. I am, again, very honored to have been asked to be the guest speaker at the event. So I'm looking forward to that. And the date of that would be March 25th at 6 p.m. I'm sorry, March 26th at 6 p.m. at the American Legion here in Hartford. I get a little confused because I want to bring to your attention another event, which is occurring on March 25th, and that is a games night. It's essentially a fundraiser for my campaign for re-election, but it's intended to be a very fun night. There will be activities including card games, board games like chess, backgammon. Card games would include bid whist, spades, pinochle. There will be a number of other board games, obviously Monopoly, such as Monopoly, Scrabble. There will also be karaoke performances featuring Mayor Luke Bronin and yours truly. So it's an event that you don't want to miss. Do come by. The location will be 555 Asylum Avenue in Hartford. That's the art space facility on Asylum Avenue. I look forward to seeing you there. Time to take another break. We'll be back. Welcome back. I want to continue our discussion by just highlighting some of the things that are happening at the state capitol. Probably the most important of which is some of the budget difficulties that we are encountering. The state of Connecticut is about $550 million in deficit. And as you can imagine, that's causing a lot of anxiety, not only on the part of government officials, but as you might expect, also on the part of those organizations that are being supported by state funding. And part of what causes that anxiety is not only the prospect of spending cuts being implemented, but also a difference in approach to funding. One of the things that the governor has proposed is to adopt a block grant approach to funding, and essentially allocating a lump sum to departments and leaving it up to the commissioner of those departments concerning how that money is to be allocated. So there's a lot of trepidation that has pervaded the, particularly the nonprofit community, wondering how they would fare under such a system and who would be accountable for whatever decisions are to be made that might result in a lack of funding for their program or service. Similarly, the city of Hartford is in a difficult fiscal situation. And last week, there were rumors of potential state takeover of the city of Hartford. And I think, if my recollection serves me correctly, the deficit, the budget deficit for the city of Hartford approaches $50 million. And so there is a lot of meeting and discussing going on. I think it is premature to talk in terms of an actual state takeover. But there's no question that some of the discussion has to involve consideration of concessions on the part of workers and labor unions, as well as the consideration of some ideas for the generation of additional revenue for the city of Hartford. Stay tuned regarding the money matters, both at the state level and at the local level here in Hartford. As far as my committee work is concerned, the Judiciary Committee is again very active on some issues. On the forefront in this legislative session happens to be issues related to human trafficking and domestic violence. And particularly, there will be consideration of a temporary restraining order proposal. And some of those proposals regarding temporary restraining orders will have to do with an automatic 8-hour hold on an individual who threatens the life or physical well-being of a family member. And additionally, if that individual possesses a firearm, even with a permit, the confiscation of that firearm would be connected automatically to the granting of a temporary restraining order under certain circumstances. I am also a member of the Public Safety and Security Committee at the Connecticut General Assembly, and I was, I will say, amused, and want you to know that I feel that the open carry issue is a very serious issue. So when I say amused, I want you to keep in context what I'm talking about. I'll explain. Open carry has to do with people who possess permits openly brandishing firearms in public and not being required to show their permit to any police officer who stops them and inquires. There is a bill in public safety that is designed to change that law to make it such that a person who is stopped by a police officer who requests to see the permit for the firearm must comply with that request. And the reason I am amused by the opposition and the resistance to this particular bill is because I recall very vividly back in probably the mid to late 60s when the Black Panther Party for self-defense was involved in the community and at one point took to brandishing firearms in public. There was such an uproar. And ironically enough, President Ronald Reagan supported laws from the federal level as well as the state level. I think at the time he was governor of the state of California, and he promoted a law which would prohibit individuals from publicly brandishing firearms, even if they had a permit that allowed them to do so. Even further ironic is the fact that the National Rifle Association, the NRA, were avid supporters of this law in California, which would prohibit individuals from publicly brandishing firearms. And I say all of this is ironic because you fast forward to today, and the NRA is among those who openly advocate for Second Amendment rights, including the possession of any type of firearm that an individual chooses to possess. And now their position is in support of people who want to openly carry firearms and resist any inquiries by law enforcement officers, and specifically request to show that they have a permit in order to carry the firearm. So we are indeed living in interesting times. There's a lot of irony in today's political arena. One need look no further than the Black Lives Matter movement and the campaign for the presidency of the United States of America. And with some of the remarks and some of the activities that some of these candidates are involved in, we can only be left to scratch our heads and wonder what's to become of the United States of America, and specifically what will be the fate of Black folks under the contemplated administration of people like Donald Trump or Ted Cruz or Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, for that matter. We are indeed living in interesting times, and it would behoove us all not to sleep on whatever's going on, but to be continually vigilant and active in our politics as well as our community activities. So until next time, when we will resume the conversation, this is Eric Coleman, State Senator from the Second Senatorial District, host of the Senate Reports, signing off. Thank you.